May as well just do away with the regular season and make college football like the WWE. Everything's scripted. Just pick the teams you want in the playoff before the season even starts. Is that what you want, Kirk Herbstreit? Is that what you want, Paul Finebaum? In this episode, we're going to talk about why folks like those two and others are ruining college football for the rest of us. And we're going to do it in this episode, which is brought to you by BetUS Online Sportsbook and Katz, Cantor, Stonestreet, and Buckner Attorneys at Law. I'm going to give you my thoughts on what these fine gentlemen had to say. Talk about why blowouts in college football playoff games are not that uncommon anyway, regardless of how many teams are in it. And then we're going to talk about ESPN bias and does it exist? And we'll do that right after this word from one of those channel sponsors. Since 1931, the attorneys at Katz, Cantor, Stonestreet, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident or fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Katz, Cantor, Stonestreet, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. What is up? Welcome into another edition of Couz's Corner. Come on in, make yourself comfortable, belly yourself up to the bar, and let me pour you out another shot of top shelf college football news and analysis. On tap in this episode, we're talking about the college football playoff, the results that happened this weekend, and the hot takes, controversial takes given by folks like Paul Finebaum, Kirk Herbstreit, and others that have others within college football and the sports media coming after them to a degree. We'll give you my thoughts on their comments. We're even going to throw Lane Kiffin, the coach at Ole Miss, in the mix here and talk about some things he tweeted out during these college football playoff games. I'm going to tell you why folks like this are ruining the sport and why the stuff they're saying is bonkers, okay? So let's go ahead and start off by talking about what Paul Finebaum and Kirk Herbstreit had to say. But before we get to them, let's real quick, because it kind of ties together, I'm going to show you a screenshot of Lane Kiffin. And during this past weekend's college football playoff games, Lane Kiffin put out some tweets. And here's one of them that says, Paul Finebaum had put out a tweet that says, so far, the CFP Selection Committee has given us some blockbusters. Take a bow. He was being sarcastic, talking about both Indiana and SMU getting basically blown out in their games. Well, Lane Kiffin reposted that tweet by Finebaum. And then before that, he put out his own tweet that said, way to keep us on the edge of our seats, committee. Riveting. Again, criticizing them for letting in Indiana and Notre Dame. Indiana and SMU, who got beat by Notre Dame and Penn State, respectively. So Lane Kiffin got in on the action, okay? And then Paul Finebaum, not only did he have that tweet, but here's something else Paul Finebaum said. He went on a show later, I guess it was the following day, on Sunday, said the committee did a lousy job. He called Indiana and SMU frauds. He went as far as to call them frauds, that they should have never been in the CFP. Then had the gall to say that Tennessee did enough to get in and Indiana and SMU did not. He literally said that. Indiana was an 11-1 football team in a power conference. Yes, they didn't have to play Oregon. No, they didn't have to play Penn State. I understand all that. They did beat Michigan, who beat Ohio State, though, if that matters to you. And they did win 11 games on the season in a power league. That should matter, Mr. Finebaum. That should matter. And speaking of Tennessee, you want to look at their record? Let's go ahead and look at their resume. Let's go ahead and look at it. They get beat 42-17 by Ohio State. No criticism of them. Oh, they're good. They should have been in. They're not frauds. Why, Paul? Because they play in the conference that you like? Give me a break, Paul. Now, let's look at Tennessee's resume. They beat Tennessee Chattanooga. Okay, la-di-da. They beat NC State, who was a 6-6 team. They beat Kent State, one of the worst teams in all of FBS. They beat Oklahoma in Norman. Oklahoma went on. They ended up being only a 6-6 team. They beat Florida, who was an 8-5 team. That's a decent win, but it was at home. They beat Kentucky, who's not even bowl eligible. They beat Mississippi State, who's the worst team in the SEC this year. They beat UTEP, a group of 5 team, and they beat a 6-6 Vanderbilt team. And now they did beat Alabama. Alabama's the one good win on their resume. So I'll give them credit for that one. But then you can't offset that with a loss to somebody like Arkansas, who got beat by Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State was a 0-win team in Big 12 play. They beat Arkansas, a 6-6 Arkansas team who beat Tennessee. So to sit there and tell me that Indiana's a fraud and SMU's a fraud and Tennessee's not, makes no sense, Paul. Makes 0 sense, buddy. Terrible argument. Terrible argument. Okay? And at least the ACC and the Big Ten aren't playing friggin' group of 5 teams the next to last week of the season before their rivalry game. The only conference doing that is the SEC. Okay. But they're not a fraud. They're not a fraud. But a 1-loss Indiana team and a 2-loss SMU team who lost the conference championship by a friggin' last-second field goal, they're a fraud. And look, I wasn't even a huge fan of SMU getting in, to be honest with you. But I'm not going to say they didn't deserve it. They were a 2-loss team in a power league. I thought BYU should have gotten in over them because of the head-to-head victory, but I wasn't mad about them getting in. They did make it to their conference championship game and lost on a last-second field goal, so they did deserve a spot in the playoff, you could argue. So to say they're frauds is absolutely ludicrous. And then let's talk about what Kirk Herbstreit said. Now, this one might be the worst because at least we all know Paul Finebaum has always been an SEC homer, right? But Kirk Herbstreit, man, a guy who works for ESPN, by the way, he covers the entirety of the sport, calls games live. He had the gall, and I can't play the video because of copyright, but here's what he said, and I'm going to paraphrase here. He said that they're looking too much at wins and losses, and that's an old-fashioned way of doing it. That you need to look more at who teams beat. Okay, so wins and losses don't matter. Then why even play the friggin' game? This is a sport, and I love what Josh Pate put out on his channel. I recommend you go watch Josh Pate's take on Kirk Herbstreit's comments. He hit the nail on the head. This is not a Netflix documentary here. This is not a Netflix series. These are sporting events where wins and losses are decided on the field. And wins and losses are the primary factor in deciding who plays for a championship. So to say that yes, I'm not saying strength of schedule shouldn't matter at all. But to make a careless comment that wins and losses are given too much importance, then you might as well say, hey, then nobody gets in but the SEC and Big Ten and call it a day. Is that what you really want? Then come out and say it, Kirk Herbstreit. Come out and say it. And we'll talk later about, is it part of a bigger agenda that he's pushing here, a bigger narrative? But it's absolutely ludicrous to say wins and losses shouldn't matter. Wins and losses have mattered throughout history in college athletics. It's literally the one thing that makes college athletics pure. And look, and I do watch some WWE, but I'm aware that it's scripted. Sporting events are not supposed to be scripted. You don't determine the champion on paper. It's done on the friggin' field. And yes, schedules are unbalanced, but you know whose fault that is? You know whose fault it is that schedules are unbalanced? All the leaders in college football, primarily the SEC. The people who are the biggest mouthpieces saying that the CFP committee got it wrong and all this. Guess who made the SEC more balanced and created all this parity in the SEC, which causes their teams to lose more games? Guess who was the reason for that? Guess who allowed Texas and Oklahoma in their league? That's right, the SEC and Greg Sankey. Guess who was behind that move? ESPN, because they say, yep, we'll give you more money if you get Texas and Oklahoma. So now you have 16 teams, a big portion of them being blue blood programs. So of course they're going to beat up on each other. Why wouldn't they? So don't complain about having your teams with 3 losses, all in conference, by the way. All 3 of Alabama's losses were in conference. Greg Sankey wants to complain about them not getting in. All 3 of the losses were in conference. Don't let teams like you think Texas and Oklahoma are going to come in and be doormats? If they were, you wouldn't have brought them in the first place. Well, then they beat some of your teams, keep them out of the playoff, and then you're going to complain about it. You cannot have your cake and eat it too, Greg Sankey. You cannot have your cake and eat it too, ESPN, Paul Finebaum, Kirk Herbstreit. So shut your fat traps up. GTFOH at it with that stuff. I don't want to hear it anymore. The Big 12, the ACC, the group of 5 teams, when they win conferences, when they win 10, 11 games, they deserve a seat at the playoff table. Because they deserve it. Period. This is not a reality show. It's not a scripted event. It's not a beauty pageant. It's a sporting event where the contest is decided by the final score. Let's go ahead and move on to the next topic, which is blowouts are not new. And I've got data to back that up. Before we do that, though, I do want to remind you of my partnership with BetUS Online. Right now at BetUS Online, if you're first-time bettor over there making your first deposit, you get a 150% sign-up bonus. If you use promo code YouTube150 at checkout, again, promo code YouTube150 at checkout, get you a 150% sign-up bonus. You also get 125% on your next 2 deposits, up to a grand total of $2,000. And right now, if you want to bet, let's say, for example, you want to bet on a bowl game. The first bowl game coming up for the Big 12, because this is a Big 12-driven channel, it's Rutgers and Kansas State in the Rate Bowl. If you want to place a bet on that game, actually, Kansas State's favored by 6.5. I actually like that spread. I think they are a much better team than Rutgers. I think they win by at least a touchdown. So I'm going to go over here and take Kansas State to win and cover. I'm putting $10 on it. I'm placing my bet. I'm confirming my bet, and I'm in. So if you want to be the one if you want to do the same thing on that game or any other game for that matter, make sure you do it with BetUS and take advantage of that offer. Now, let's jump right back in to the topic here. Let's talk about the blowouts not being new. Everybody wants to get all bent out of shape about Indiana getting blown out by Notre Dame and about SMU getting blown out by Penn State because of the 12-team format. Well, let's go back to the 4-team format, and let's look at a few games. Let's look at some history here. 2015. Oregon defeats FSU in the semifinal round 59-20. I don't recall, maybe I'm wrong because it is a long time ago, but I don't recall anyone complaining that FSU should not have been in the CFP and that they were frauds. That same year, Ohio State beat Oregon in the national championship 42-20. Go to 2016. Clemson defeats Oklahoma 37-17. Even worse, Bama defeats Michigan State 38-0. Now, again, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't recall Michigan State being called a fraud. Okay? Everybody's talked about how great Bama was. You know what? Maybe Penn State and maybe Notre Dame are just really good football teams. You ever think about that, Paul Finebaum? Kirk Herbstreit? Anyway, let's keep going. 2017, Clemson defeats Ohio State 31-0 in the semifinal round. 31-0, the almighty Buckeyes. I don't recall them being called frauds. 2019, Clemson defeats Notre Dame 30-3 in the semifinal round, and then goes on to defeat Alabama 44-16 in the national title game. I don't recall Paul Finebaum calling Alabama a fraud or Kirk Herbstreit calling Alabama a fraud. No, again, I could be wrong. Maybe my memory's failing me here, but I don't recall all this hate from the media talking heads openly now about these schools. You know why? Because they're blue blood programs. That's my opinion. I think if Indiana If you changed Indiana's logo, you wouldn't have all that to an Ohio State logo or to a Notre Dame logo or to an Alabama logo. You wouldn't have this rhetoric out there. Same goes for SMU. If SMU wasn't a group of 5 team a year ago, or you changed their logo to something else, to a blue blood team, if it was the same result and they had a different logo, I don't think you'd have this rhetoric. I really don't, because we all see nobody's reacting the same way to Tennessee getting blown out because of the logo. ESPN and the talking heads push logos instead of pushing football competition. But and the teams who earned their spot getting in, that's what they push. Now, there are more examples, but I don't need to go on. But you get my point. Blowouts have been a thing forever. It happens. It even happens in the NFL. It happens in Major League Baseball. It happens in every sport. You have blowouts in playoff games. It is what it is. It's part of sports. But it doesn't make SMU and Indiana earning their spot any less relevant. So shut up with the rhetoric about blowouts. Because if you don't want blowouts, then just don't play the games, and let's just cancel everything. No more sports. How about that? Kirk, Herbstreit, and Paul Finebaum. No more sports because we can't have blowouts. So this feeds into the third topic, which is ESPN bias to blue bloods. I didn't used to think so. I'll be honest with you. I used to give them a benefit of the doubt and think it was just a conspiracy theory. But after some of these comments that I've seen from Kirk Herbstreit, from Paul Finebaum and others who work at ESPN, by the way, and who seem to be pushing a narrative that benefits the teams who play on their network, with the exception of SMU, of course, and who seem to be pushing for, because they want more competitive games in the CFP, because ESPN owns the rights to the CFP. It's hard not to feel that way. It's hard not to feel there's a bias or an agenda, because their employer tends to benefit from this. They would benefit from having Alabama in the CFP. They would benefit from having closer games in the CFP, because why? You would get more people watching the games. So is there ESPN bias for the blue bloods, especially SEC? I'm actually starting to think there is now, despite not believing that before. It's hard to give them the benefit of the doubt when you hear all this stupid rhetoric, and it just gets louder and louder and louder. Give these teams their flowers. SMU had a great season. Indiana had a great season. They deserve spots in the CFP, and they're not frauds. They earned it. So I want to hear what you think. Do you think ESPN has a bias towards the SEC, or at least towards the blue blood programs? Do you think Indiana and SMU are frauds and shouldn't have gotten in? And look, I think I may have said this earlier. I thought BYU deserved a spot more than SMU because they beat them head to head, but it still doesn't take away from the fact that SMU got it and they earned it. It's like grasping at straws when you get down to the top, 11, 12, 13 teams. They're all pretty equal as far as how much they deserve it, to be honest. But SMU appeared in their conference championship game, lost on a last-second field goal. They deserved a spot in the CFP. So get out of here, Paul Finebaum, Kirk Herbstreit, and others, with this stupid rhetoric that wins and losses shouldn't matter. It's ludicrous. And it is a total disrespect and slap to the face of sports as we know it. The integrity of sporting events. Anyway, I want to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comment section right now. I want to give a quick shout out to my VIP channel members, some VIP channel members. The shout outs of this episode are Damon Tillman, Matt Moran, Brian, Kenneth North, Mark Aldridge, and Jake T. Thank you all for being paid VIP members here on the channel. If you want to join this club, hit the join button below or hit the join button over at my channel homepage. There are 2 levels to choose from. It'll tell you what all the perks are after you hit the button. And want to also give another shout out to my channel sponsors here, Cats, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner Attorneys at Law, and BetUS Online Sportsbook. Thank them for helping keep the lights on. Also, don't forget, I have a merch store. Go to Couz'sCorner.com/shop. You'll see a link to my merch store. Go check it out right now. Have all kinds of different designs to choose from. Also have an ONIT Athlete Trading Cards link and a link to my Fanatics shop. I'll get a small commission from all of those sales from that shop page. I appreciate you tuning into this episode. Hope the rest of your day is top shelf. Check this episode out right here. If you want, you may like it. And then Q Country Roads.